it's such an honor to be here and meet so many amazing creatives already in the last few minutes. Yeah, it's just such a wonderful group of people, and I feel like I may have mentioned this before, but I have a former coworker from WEP who gave a CreativeMornings speech 12 years ago, Tim Hunter. And so it's been a while since I've engaged with this community, but I love it. So thank you. Okay, thank you guys for coming. On the left-hand side, you can see a picture of my family in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My parents landed there when they came to the U.S. To study engineering and history, respectively. And I feel like I've spent most of my career trying to bridge the disciplines. So I'd like to mention a couple things at the top. Okay. I don't think innovation necessarily serves a specific economic model. Whenever I hear politicians or corporations talk about the virtues of American innovation, I think about the infinite growth model for our economy that relies on continually expanding GDP. Sometimes it feels like we've tacitly accepted a plan to exhaust all of our natural resources and then move on to the human brain as the last remaining viable resource. But personally, I'm not resigned to that future yet. I also wanted to say that cultural context can bias our perception of innovation. I was born and raised in America, and Americans tend to characterize the lifestyles and practices of those outside of America as rooted in tradition, whereas our own choices are innovative. America celebrates ideation, invention, and newness to the extent that it's almost been codified into like an art form, and it can become kind of performative. And even though I do create like devices and write code to produce custom interfaces in my work, I'm aware that my practice has emerged from the system. This leads me to the next question. Why was I invited to talk about innovation? I would guess it's because I engage with technology like electronics and code in a somewhat naive way to express my feelings and explore my emotions. But I also, in the last few years of seeking, I have found that I've discovered that sometimes innovation can come from vulnerability in spaces of uncertainty. So I'll talk more about that as I go through my work. So if you'll join me for a journey 20 years into the past, I'd like to share a personal project I call Durga. Durga Mahishasura is an ancient Indian myth that describes a goddess who slays a buffalo demon. The phenomenon of Durga evolved in concert with culture and technology in the form of prayer verse, temple architecture, and so many other media. There are myriad manifestations of Durga throughout time. Here you can see an evolution of the symbol of Durga from like a talismanic symbol through temple relief sculpture. I wanted to explore my relationship to Durga. Well, apologies for that.
Sorry, not trying.
No,
I do too.
well, yeah, so in these drawings, I'm trying to explore my relationship to this phenomenon through art. And I'm trying to illustrate the many versions of the Durga Mahishasura myth across India. For example, the birth story of Mahishasura varies from region to region. In some versions of the story, Mahishasura is actually the protagonist. You can see I'm starting to play with like integrating corporate logos like Jack in the Box and video game controllers into the story. I'm trying to like break the medium. I eventually connected to the core reason for my interest in this phenomenon, my grandmother. She was a Bharatanatyam teacher and classical dancer. I asked for her help choreographing an animation involving Durga. Working with my grandmother helped me understand the final form. It's an interactive canvas where the projected image is connected to the movement of the painted image. So basically, when the viewer rotates this canvas, they can explore the story. In this version, when the viewer turns the wheel counterclockwise, let me also just see if my sound is working. in this version, what you're seeing here, when the viewer turns the wheel counterclockwise, they see a version of the story where Durga and Mahishasura they fight endlessly. The story will do. But if they switch directions, they'll encounter a version of the story where the two characters actually start dancing and they get along. So you can see I'm trying to create a device that basically addresses my full understanding of this phenomenon and the multiple parallel narratives. So also around this time, here are some other projects spanning from basically science communication to interaction design and games for therapy, etc. I'd like to move into my work and time at WET Design in Burbank. WET is an extraordinary community established by Mark Fuller in 1983. They have over 300 fountains around the world, including the fountains of Bellagio and the world's largest fountain in Dubai. I spent 2012 to 2020 working there. I came to WET with a media and installation art background, so I was excited to push the medium of projection and explore the idea of interactivity in water features. This is a 110-foot tall water feature in a tiny airport complex in Singapore called Jewel. I worked on many projects throughout many years at WET, but this is a good case study. Here you can see me watching my animation from the top floor of the Jewel complex as it was under construction with my coworker Ting Zhang. My primary responsibility in this project was show design. Some moments from my early animation tests. Of course, there's so many groups involved in a project like this, it's too many to mention, but I just like to call out Softy Architects, Capital Land, Tiny Group, of course, so many more. You can see the WET CEO, Mark Fuller, included. I might also like to highlight Academy Award-winning FX guru Jim Doyle and Howard Tsai, bottom left and right. They were instrumental and basically they kind of laid a lot of foundation for working with projection on water before I got to it. So as I mentioned, my role is centered on social design. So I made a 1-minute video summarizing 5 years worth of development, experiments, and installation. So I'll return to some moments from that video. So here's a little insight into some experimental process. So on the left-hand side, you can see some renders from Maya, two-dimensional, that are being projected onto water. On the right-hand side, it's a capture of an actual space at WET called Area 9, where the mock-up team has created a 10-foot diameter mock-up of a rain ring. One thing to note here, basically, you can see how projecting a two-dimensional line through a cylinder of rain produces what appears to be like a circle in space. Here's another such mock-up where a couple of things to note. The contrast between kind of slow-moving projected animation through quick-moving droplets of water creates this really interesting contrast between motion and stillness that produces a really meditative quality to this work. Another thing is that each little droplet is like a prism and it splits light as it passes through, so when you move your head left to right, the colors change Another technical detail of this project that I think is pretty interesting is the team worked together to design the edge of the waterfall in such a way that it could produce a range of water expressions, but also like a fine curtain of water that could resolve projection clearly. So here you can see just like some testing I'm doing where basically utilizing kind of an atmospheric medium like water, mist, you can yeah, just listen, actually that's probably more interesting. You know, after this, I say this is like, in short, basically, if you point a projector at volumetric media, it can like a line becomes a plane and a circle becomes a cone. So it takes like two-dimensional work and makes it more 3D. Another interesting facet of the show design is that there's like 12 projectors currently encircling this water feature. So it's kind of like a theater in the round, where when you walk around, you see different things. So amidst this work on Jewel, I found some time for some personal exploration. And this is, basically I wanted to create a system that would bring the water, kind of make this rain ring almost like a dance partner that reacts to touch and kind of is responsive. So here you can see some tests I did in that same experimental space. After hours, where I've written some code to look through an infrared camera and see my friend's movement inside of the rain ring and translate that motion into abstract geometrical forms and project that back through the water so that at the viewer, so that the dancer's silhouette becomes kind of part of the piece. So my friend's Jessica and Christine. And so I asked them to kind of treat the code like a collaborative partner. So this is all improvisational based on what they're seeing and feeling. Alright. So I, like many in the world, had planned on dedicating some time to personal projects in 2020. The best year ever. I had planned this for 10 years, so I stuck to my guns when the pandemic hit. I tackled a lot of projects, including a 72-page book of poetry, making an interactive dance hall for some events, working on a music video for 3D Bridgers, but there was one project that kind of came back over and over again in my brain, which is something I called Soup Story. And what this is, it's a children's book that I wrote with my ex, featuring a captain and a naturalist who makes magical soup in her sleep. She's wooed by a prince on land, but she decides to follow her heart back to the sea instead of choosing a relationship. Shortly after finishing the story, my ex and I parted ways. This was like, a long time ago. It was completely over by the pandemic, but basically, was kind of returning to the story and kind of endlessly illustrating it and painting it and designing it. And it took me some time to realize my main motivation for continuing to work on the project. It was actually, I think, the personal challenge of speaking my feelings out loud, which, if you can't tell based on the presentation so far, I'm kind of an introvert and I like to be huddled away in a cave, usually by myself. So I made an app to solve that. So here's kind of like a little sample of how that works.
In the center of the city, the palace stood, shining like the moon.
The captain met a handsome, brown-eyed prince said.
So you get the idea. Basically,
and shouted,
you
make the best soup. I would like you to be
words
my royal
appear on a blank
wife.
screen, and as you read the words out loud, it produces animation and imagery corresponding to what you say. So I brought this to some schools, and you can kind of see. It's going to change the shape of the drawing. So, I just, to kind of summarize that experience, like I think, kind of investigating, this story actually led me to a place where I gained some perspective on my actual motivation and then perspective on this technology, as simple as a microphone, but it gave me some idea of how to employ that in a way that could be a little different than normal. And that relates to my final project that I'll share, which is I'm calling Light on Shapes. Basically, this project is currently consuming my life. It is, I think, in short, flying, back and forth from Singapore and kind of being exposed to different kinds of hierarchies there, class hierarchies and, dynamics between different groups of people, and then flying back to LA and realizing that, those same dynamics exist in LA in different forms. It made me reflect on a lot of things like, these various layers of spectacle and technology, but also just labor. And so I don't know if you guys have ever experienced like a fever dream where, you're kind of struck with this vision, and this happened to me where I was tossing and turning and I had this vision that just kind of took over my brain, and then it was this clear idea of like 1,000 square foot space where I essentially, it's populated with sculpture, interactive things, and I started building it as soon as I woke up, and I've been building it since. So here's like a really quick example of what it entails. It involves like detailed mesh sculptures that are kind of revealed by projection. But I'll show you guys basically this is a world premiere of my weird cave. So here's, which I just documented with Alejandro. We just kind of, so a few friends have peeked into this cave, but here's a little peek in the cave. So yeah, part of the concept here is it's a dark room where there's basically like sculptures that are nearly invisible that are revealed by projection, and some of them are figurative and others are abstract, and they're all kind of controlled by the central element called the turntable. And I think the concept is about the cyclical exchange between perception and habitat. Architect Toyohiro writes beautifully about form as a manifestation of flow. To me, this phrase frames our built environment as a manifestation of the flow of people and information, and it also frames the natural world and living things as a manifestation of the flow of energy, chemical, kinetic, heat, etc. This makes me wonder, what are the different kinds of feedback between form and flow? For example, our actions shape our habitat, and which in turn shapes our behavior. How does our perception inform these actions? So in this case, the projection is kind of like a metaphor for information and how we exist in this information ecosystem. So yeah, that is... Thank you. Yes, kind of vulnerable to share unfinished documentation of work, of course. So I would say, for me, it took some years separated from, kind of like design work to understand the significant of the technology I'm using in that world of, say, light shows for art features. Gaining distance from, a kind of innovation-driven agenda, ironically helped me better understand how technology is actually received and use it in unexpected or more innovative ways. Like as a human being, like how do human beings actually look at a projector? Like what is it, So being vulnerable and open was necessary for me to reach this place in my work. And I think it's finally resonating with people in a different way. Like a couple representatives from the Pacific Asian Museum showed up during like a brief open studio I had, and they asked me to create a version of that installation at a show opening hypothetically next week, but we're going to delay probably. So it's, essentially I feel like that, kind of really challenging the roots of, the kind of intention behind these kind of instruments of spectacle, so to speak, kind of, I think helps me understand how to use them more creatively. So, thank you for coming.